Thanks so much for joining us today. I know you're really busy this time of year. Real quick, before we get into the specific policy, I'm curious, when you think about public education in Idaho, what does your idea of success look like?
Melissa, education and success in education can be measured in many different ways. But I believe that some of the main metrics that we talk about all of the time, of course, are graduation rates. We look at SAT scores, we look at our ISAT scores, we look at literacy, K-3 literacy. Those are some of the major, I think, metrics that we would look at in order to determine success.
But how about you personally as the chairman? What do you weight more than others?
I'm not sure I can say that I weight any more than others. I think it takes a mix, an accumulation of all of those to really determine success. But there's one factor that we may not look at in that, and that is, in my opinion, we have to look at teacher satisfaction and student satisfaction. And those are really hard sometimes to measure, but they also contribute significantly to the success of the overall organization.
So are you happy with teacher and student satisfaction right now?
No. I think if I said that, I'm not doing my job, meaning I believe that we can do better. And I believe that we need to have a lot more interaction with our parents and our students and get them engaged in the educational process. I don't believe that we're doing a good job of that right now. I think we're doing a little better job of saying teachers are important and thank you teachers for all that you're doing and you're doing a good job and we can do a little better.
So how do you get there?
How do we get there?
Right.
Number one is I think that we need to engage parents and students. And that's a tough lift. That's a big lift. It's an awareness campaign, it's a public relations campaign, and you have to create an emphasis. The first place that you can create that emphasis is going back to our schools, our teachers, our administrators, and getting the message to them saying parents do play a role, a significant role. Just as a reminder, they know it. But again, let's remember and bring those parents in. And that's been tough as we've changed standards, and particularly if you're thinking about Idaho's content standards, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, and I'm hoping that we can get over that.
Yeah, and I want to get to those standards in a second, but because happiness isn't measurable, like you said, is that something that has kind of a trickle-down effect? Like once you achieve student happiness and teacher happiness and satisfaction, you'll see those literacy scores go up. You'll see the ACT and SAT scores up, and scores go up, and the go-on rate.
And when I talk about that student and parent, feeling good about education is one thing. Being involved is completely different. And so I'm asking our parents and students to be more engaged specifically in the education process. We know because of the recent policy statements and surveys done by the Policy Center at BSU that education in the public's eyes is rising in favorability. And so that's wonderful. But again, we've got quite a ways to go to say, parents, be involved. And I can't express enough the importance in today's educational environment that it takes more and more parental involvement than even in the past. When I was growing up, when you were in school, our public schools we were going through the motions, but guess what? Every student today has so many different opportunities for learning that parent needs to be there guiding, saying, okay, we want online learning in this instance. We want the public school learning in this instance. And the different opportunities of choice in education, I think, is increasing and going to be increasing more and more in the future.
Because you mentioned science standards and curriculum standards, I have to bring this up. The climate change vote in the Senate Education Committee, after lengthy testimony the week before, you voted to go ahead with what the House had proposed, rejecting the 5 rules that had to do with climate change and human contribution to that. And I know the discussion. I know why, the logic.
Good. Does the public know?
Well,
that's the question. And I think we had a great public debate. Open dialogue, and I think that all of those that came to the Senate committee when we had the public testimony understood the process much more than they did in the past.
That it, had you said, no, we want to keep these 5, then the House would have rejected that, and you would have gone back to those standards written in 2001.
Yeah, old standards. So by doing, the Education Committee, I believe, made a strategic decision of saying we want the new standards. We want the majority of the new standards. We want 370 of the 375 standards. And I think it's important also that the public understands that, guess what? By rejecting those 5 standards, either in the House or in the Senate, we got the 370, but we also recognize that we didn't reject the concept completely. We rejected the wording, the semantics, the things that were in there. We think that there was a way that those same 5 standards could be rewritten and still include change in climate or climate change. And as you know, we asked specifically, are those 2 terms somewhat interchangeably? And the person that had working on it said, almost always you could say change in climate versus climate change. And yet I believe that many people recognize or think of the fact that those 2 aren't interchangeably, aren't interchangeable. And that's a huge issue that I think the legislature has tried to address, and it's tough for the public and the legislature to talk about those type of things.
Related to that, and this is more of a broad philosophical approach to this, when it comes to education, when is it best left up to educators and teachers and scientists who have dedicated their careers to this, and when is it best left up to lawmakers like those on your committee?
In reality, it is left up already to the districts and the educators, because guess what? Those standards are set. The districts, those are minimum standards. The districts and the teachers have the ability to exceed those. The districts have the ability to choose the actual curriculum. This standard is a base standard set by the state saying, because we're providing the public funding, we think that we should have at least this standard taught in our educational system.
Moving on to the upcoming election day, Idaho Education News has tallied $714 million on the ballot in bonds and levies for this upcoming election. And that's more than a third of Idaho school districts that have something that they're asking the public to help fund in one way or another. And some of these are districts that have gone to the public multiple times. What does that tell you? What does that say to you about Idaho's way of funding public education and its infrastructure needs?
I believe, first let's talk about the overall education. Idaho in education spending, as you know, we spend almost 50% of our general fund budget on education. There's not many, if any, states that really spend that much. So we are putting a lot of money into public education.
But compared to other states per student, that funding is less than it is elsewhere in the country.
Absolutely. But on the contrary, I can say because it is less and we're getting a higher result, is that good? I mean, you got to make sure that you understand it in context. And so I don't think it's fair to say just because Idaho is close to the bottom in its spending per student, you have to take a lot more factors into consideration. Is it enough? What is enough? And no, personally, I don't believe it's enough. I believe that we need more money for education. I think coming back to the numbers that you just talked about and these levies and bonds, I think that our communities are saying we would like to put more in, and we're willing to step up as a community and put more money in. I also think that it has to do with our economy, meaning our economy is doing better. Our populace is feeling like we maybe have a little extra money, and so our schools are saying, maybe we can get our local communities to participate more in the educational process.
You know, during the budget setting process, teacher health insurance costs came up, and this was something that you had proposed funding through a line item, and the committee disagreed with you very politely.
I'm sorry. I wish they had have agreed.
Well, we've traveled the state, and this has come up in school districts across Idaho where teachers are really concerned about how to fund their rising healthcare costs.
Our districts are concerned about rising healthcare costs. If you look at the overall discretionary budget, It's showing that 20%, the healthcare used to be 20% of that discretionary portion of their budget. And it's gone up to somewhere around 41, 42%, huge increase. And our districts have also done significant things by increasing the deductible, increasing the employee contribution, all of those things to try and keep a budget and trying to keep health insurance. Some of them have been more successful than others. And I think it's way past time that the state should be actually contributing specifically to our districts and trying to keep some, I'm going to call it fairness, and some may disagree with me, but fairness between what we're doing with our state employees versus what we're doing for our public school employees, as far as making sure that both of them have the same type of insurance. You know that the state employee insurance is a very good plan. It's part of the benefit of being a state employee. And I would think that you're saying, yes, I would be willing to take a little less salary because I've got these benefits. And I believe that our schools would say, I mean, our school teachers and our administrators and everybody would say, yes, we would love to have that same plan.
So why isn't it happening?
The reason it's not happening is because we haven't tied the two together, and there's so much disparity between what's happening out here and what's happening here that, guess what? The cost of bringing all of those, anywhere from 25,000 to 37,000 K-12 employees onto a plan as rich and as beneficial as our state plan is a very large financial risk. And my plan was to take a bite out of that and to contribute to our budget the $860 a month that we're doing for our public employees and doing it for our K-12 employees.
You know, in 2013, you led an insurrection on the Senate floor that killed the Senate, or the public education funding bill over a line item and intent language. Is that something that we're going to see play out again this year because of this disagreement?
I'm not sure. I could. I believe it depends on what happens between now and when that budget comes up.
So you're not ruling out voting against the public school budget on the Senate floor over the insurance issue?
If I were voting today on that specific portion of the K-12 budget, I would be voting against it.
Would you be taking the majority of the Senate with you?
I don't think that you can say that at all.
You could.
If you're predicting, I'm going to live with your prediction.
One last question. When the 2017...
And you promise it's the last one?
I can't promise anything. When the 2017-2018 school year starts, how will public education be different for the students in Idaho?
Number one, overall budget increase for K-12, 6.34, 6.38. Tremendous support and increase in dollars, total dollars, for K-12 education. Number one. That gives our schools more flexibility. It gives them opportunities to put money into things like technology, professional development, career counseling, all of the wonderful things that we've been working on. So yes, education is going to have better funding because of this legislation, and therefore they ought to have more flexibility and the ability to do some of those things that they need to going forward.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're sure welcome. Love to talk to you again. There's so many interesting things happening. Let me just close by one thing, and that's expressing a sincere and heartfelt appreciation to our education professionals, our teachers, for the work they're doing with our students and everyone around it. They're doing a good job. We're working together to even do a better one.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.